People in Taiwan expect to live well into their 80s, and that's reshaping their priorities, whether it's physical health, better sleep, or financial security. That's according to a groundbreaking study on longevity. It also found that there are sharp generational divides when it comes to expectations towards work and health. In the first of its kind, the Global Longevity Study explores how Taiwan compares to the rest of the world and what it means for the country's future workforce. I'm Devi Gopalan, and you're watching Connected on Taiwan Plus. To understand what the Global Longevity Study reveals about Taiwan, we are joined by two people who helped make this project possible. From Oxford in the UK, we welcome Leslie Kenny, co-founder of the Oxford Longevity Project. And currently traveling in Doha, we're joined by Gurpreet Sunny Singh, founder of Roundglass. Great to have you both on the program.
Thank you.
Lovely to be here.
I'm going to start with Leslie, and just first to ask you, in a nutshell, what is the Global Longevity Study?
The Global Longevity Survey was a collaboration between Sunny Singh's Roundglass Foundation and the Oxford Longevity Project, where we asked respondents in 25 countries around the world, 14,000 respondents in total, what their attitudes were towards longevity. And really, we were trying to understand how people in the boomer generation felt about living longer, being in that part of their lives, but also we wondered what younger people felt like, seeing their grandparents and parents get older but stay healthier for longer, what implications that would have for work-life balance, how we actually organized our lives. Would it be the traditional three-part life where we start with heavy loading of education in the first third, then another third in work, and a final third of retirement, or if it would look like something else. So that was it in a nutshell. And we did ask respondents from the People's Republic of China and from the ROC as well as Japan and the United States and India. We really wanted to see if there were any differences among these cohorts. In particular, as a half Taiwanese, I wanted to see if there was a difference between Taiwan and the PRC, or if Taiwan would be more similar to, say, Japan, the United States, or India.
Well, we're really looking forward to seeing how Taiwan compares to all those different countries. But before we do that, Sunny, why did you initiate this project? Why was this important for Roundglass?
My fundamental belief and here at Roundglass is that well-being or holistic well-being is a solution to any problem that we see in the world. If you infuse well-being into that situation, that problem will disappear. That's a fundamental belief. And therefore, we believe that well-being should be started as early as grade 1 in school. And just like we teach the languages and science and math, etc., kids and others should be taught well-being throughout. And when Leslie came with the proposition that, look, we are doing this longevity survey and this research, I said, well-being and longevity go hand in hand. It's not just about living long, it's living well, as a result, living long. So it was absolutely synergistic and saying what you're doing and what we're doing absolutely makes sense to combine them and look at longevity from a purview of well-being and holistic well-being and living well-being.
On that note of living long, Leslie, often the general thinking is longer lives or people living longer means a bigger economic burden for a country or a government. And can you tell us what patterns you're seeing and whether that is the natural and inevitable path that it will take?
No, it doesn't have to be. It really depends whether or not that population has left the workforce. However, there was excellent research published by an Oxford University researcher, Martin Ellison, and two other academics in Nature, which showed that if we could simply slow the pace at which the American population is aging by 1 year, and we kept people in work longer, which meant that they're paying taxes for longer, they're more economically active. it actually would be worth 38 trillion US dollars to the US economy, which is a very, very large number. Now, if we apply the same metrics to a country like Taiwan, the amount that Taiwan could make simply by slowing the pace at which the population is aging would be 1.2 trillion US dollars. And that's certainly something that we could go after. You know, that amount of money could be then used for younger generations, for education, or for some of the things that Sunny has been talking about around well-being and health.
Leslie, again, why was so much of the survey devoted to attitudes or expectations to work?
Because work is what gives a lot of people a sense of purpose. And if there's one thing we know from the Japanese, which is a population that is aging faster, but also better than any other large population in the world, it's that ikigai, or sense of purpose, really matters to your overall sense of well-being. If you feel you are needed, that you are doing something important that is making a difference, your self-satisfaction and life satisfaction tends to go up. And we often see once people retire and leave the workforce, they lose that sense of purpose. And there is often a sharp drop off and into depression and less physical health, just because people lose that social engagement.
So Sunny, I mean, given that you're an entrepreneur, you've set up numerous companies, you've managed a large number of employees. Can you tell us, or can you give us your point of view based on what Leslie said?
You know, you look at usually the cohorts of adults as a working population, and I just referred to, you know, kids and teens in schools and our children in universities. But if you look at the senior population, 60, 65 plus, my take, you know, first of all, Leslie is very right that a sense of purpose makes you wake up in the morning and live the day. And that's saying a lot. Well, that's saying a lot because people, even adults, don't do that. A lot of people don't do that. But if we can figure out a way that the senior population, the aging population, can be productive and useful for a country, for a society, and therefore we call what I would like to introduce a term called gradually retiring. So instead of having a cliff that you retire at 60, 65, what if we told people at 60, you start working 75%, then 50%, then 25%. Now you can pay them less also, because what they want is get up in the morning and feel useful. And so they will take and say, hey, I don't care about salary anymore. I want, because I've gained experience, I have knowledge, I have wisdom. And I want a fulfilling life, and I'm not done with it as yet. I'm not ready to put my legs up and just watch TV, 8 hours a day. Why not have in our society the concept of graduating retirement? And it is good for everybody. They can be mentors, they can be peer groups for mental resilience. They have expertise in all areas. And therefore, society says, we're going to create jobs. We're going to leverage the 60 plus people in a useful manner for things that we need to. And they'll be willing to do a lot, but at a lesser pace. And they can graduate. Some people can say, OK, I want to go straight down to 25%, but give them the ability to go 75, 50, 25, and then to zero and say, I'm done. I'm going to vacation from now moving forward. Or saying, I can take 5 years off, but I want to get back into the realm of being purposeful for society and myself, and I want to come back and give them that platform, that framework to leverage our seniors who have so much wisdom and so much knowledge to share with us from their heart, because they have lived life, and a lot of us are just trying to live it, who are much younger.
And our next graph, which is from the longevity survey, speaks to that point, Sunny. Longer and healthier lives come with a downside for many, which is retirement anxiety. And that's especially true in Taiwan. According to the Global Longevity Study, Taiwan ranks #1 in the world for fear of outliving retirement savings. 82% of Gen Z worry they won't have enough to retire For millennials, that number rises to 85%. And for Gen X, it's 73%. Leslie, I'm curious. I mean, it's interesting that millennials are the most worried. What is the trend that you're seeing, or what is it from that study that kind of struck you about how millennials feel about what they have right now and their future?
Well, I think that we know in most countries, boomers and Gen X tended to be the ones who accumulated the greatest number of assets. They've also already benefited in some cases from a wealth transfer from older generations. This is something that millennials might not yet have experienced. They may see their colleagues who are doing better visually, nicer cars, bigger homes, able to afford expensive school fees and things like this, are going on holidays, but that may be due to a wealth transfer from an older generation that's already happened. Millennials are crunch generation, and they are worried again about those school fees, keeping up with the Joneses, and also thinking about caring for older parents. So they have all of these obligations being in the sandwich generation, and they at the same time have not quite hit the peak of their earnings, so they are still stressed about reaching their optimum peak earnings so that they can achieve all of these things. So I think that's actually what it's about. It's more of a life stage than specifically unique to this generation. It's something that we see in other countries as well.
Now, Sunny, going back to the idea of gradual retirement, currently, how are companies responding? Are they, from what you see, given the fact in many societies like in Taiwan with a low birth rate, there is a problem, there will be a problem also with having enough people in the labor force. Are you seeing companies responding to that? And is there concern that the advent of AI will either maybe disrupt allowing older people to get back into the workplace as they can do many of the tasks, or in fact help?
Yeah, those you hit on a few very interesting and important points. Number one, we don't see workplaces, at least I have not seen it, I've not read too much about it, where either the workplace or the leadership, so-called leadership of a country or a state or a county or whatever you want to call it, are putting in place concrete, progressive, and when I mean progressive means incorporating the disruptions of the world today, for the seniors and the retiring people to become productive members of society, or to remain productive members of society. For them to do something. Oh yeah, they might take consulting and that's part for the course, but that's a very small fraction, right? So I don't see anything material, so to speak. And it's not difficult to do. It just requires leadership at different levels to make it happen. I have not seen it. Now you can take all the people, okay, you're retiring, they get absorbed in consulting or research or think tanks or whatever you might be, or advisory boards and whatnot. And that's all good. But that's not enough. That doesn't fulfill the population that we have to service, right? So I don't see that happening. The question is it difficult to do for a company or for a state? Not at all. As a matter of fact, you will see with the advent of AI, we are seeing a couple of things. Number one, there's a huge drop in number of graduates, people who are graduating in computer science and the sciences of computing related fields. You're also seeing that people fresh out of college, the students, are having a tough time finding jobs. In the US, 65% of, if I'm not mistaken, graduates cannot find jobs in today's market. And this is just the start of what I call the first AI wave, the first AI wave. The second AI wave will be even more mature, so it become worse. So the question now becomes is, if AI is going to start doing the mundane, the routine, and the entry-level jobs, it's only going to mature from there. How does this affect the youngsters who can't find jobs, the seniors and this aging population, low birth rates? So there's a complete migration. And therefore, countries and workplaces have to take this very seriously. There's a migration crisis of youngsters not getting jobs, not enough birth rates, aging population, because very few countries have a young population, the aging population. When you take all of this into account, it is a serious issue that I think every workplace, every association, every state, and every country have to take it seriously. And somebody might take the lead on it and others can follow, or they might have culture nuances and they will tweak it. All of that is good. But I today see the lack of leadership in addressing this problem, which is a real problem. And there's a lot of conflicting forces at work. And so this will be highly disruptive, highly disruptive. And the more ahead we can get of this issue, the more proactive we can be, the better we'll handle it. Otherwise, we'll have what we call volatility. And the volatility could last for a long time with a lot of collateral damage. With that, I mean people's lives being disrupted, which we don't want.
All right, so before we go back to the survey and look at some of the other findings, Leslie, then in that case, given what Sunny said, how should employers or those who are in a position to be decision makers be looking at the global longevity survey? How should they be looking at the results of this survey and translating it on how things should be working, especially for the future?
Well, a huge number of respondents did say that that workplace well-being and healthcare was very important to them. Even specific metrics like sleep ranked very highly. However, uniquely for Taiwan, they really value salary. And they don't actually want their employers to make the decision on healthcare and make that provision for them. They would much rather have higher salaries so they can have agency and allocate the money as they see fit. So I do think that employers need to dig into this a bit more deeply, ask how they can be of service to their employees, perhaps by allowing them to opt in to healthcare programs. Again, if you can take a large cohort of employees, you can get a much cheaper rate on, say, something like health insurance or other benefits. What I would say is that given the average age in Taiwan's workforce is 42. We can see that the workforce population is aging out rapidly. And people now, because they're living longer, it may be viable for employers to offer them timeouts or sabbaticals in the same way that they did for women who were pregnant. And they then offered them a path to come back to the workforce, refreshed and recharged and ready to contribute again. And I think that we may see this, just as Sunny mentioned, some people who are older might only want to work 75%. I think this flexi working, which we have already trialed with working mothers, is something that we will likely see with the older generation who do have a contribution to make to the workforce, who may be able to hot desk with a much younger employee who wants to, say, travel the world. Maybe together, the older person can mentor the younger person and they can handle the job of one person together. But I think employers need to be thinking about these creative ways to keep people in the workforce for longer.
Unfortunately, in this part of the world, there's a lot of resistance from the end of the employers to flexi working and giving some of that extra space for the employees. But we're going to talk about that in the next segment. And before that, a quick word to our audience. If you would like to join the conversation and stay connected to tech and business stories from Taiwan, follow us on our socials. Next, we look at how Gen Z is managing their health and what the workplace could look like a decade from now. Stick around. Across all measures, Taiwan stands out from the US, Japan, China, and India, showing more moderate levels of work-life satisfaction, much higher expectations for employer support, along with an emphasis on physical health, all while remaining more salary-driven than the global average. These are the findings of the groundbreaking global longevity study. It reveals that the newest generation entering the workforce, Gen Z, have very different expectations from their more experienced colleagues. So what do these generational shifts mean for Taiwan's workforce? Well, to help us understand what the future of work could or should look like, we are joined once again by Gurpreet Sunny Singh, founder of Roundglass, and Leslie Kenny, co-founder of the Oxford Longevity Project. So Sunny, set the scene here. What would you say caught your attention about Gen Z in the study and what it means for the future workforce?
Yeah, so I think there were a lot of interesting findings. And Gen Zs are not like my generation for sure, which was expected, but it was very interesting to see the outlook towards well-being. We're looking at, are they willing to compromise salary for more well-being in their lives? And of course, they have the anxiety around retirement, but they're not willing to compromise their salary compared to other parts of the world saying, hey, I'll take lesser salary, but I need more well-being in my life. And if you really take a long-term view to life, right, like a full holistic view to life, people start ailing and falling sick as they age, whether you're 40s, 50s, or 60s. Now imagine that I'm willing to take lesser salary, focus more on my well-being so that as I age, and I don't mean age 60, 70, 80, but 30 to 40 to 50 to 60, I'm living a more fulfilling life because I'm feeling good, I'm living well, I'm enjoying life more, I have better social connects. My holistic life is much more better than what it will be just because I'm chasing the best salary all throughout. So when you compromise a little, you're investing in your future of living. Nobody invests in the future of living. They're investing in the future of financial independence. I think we can shave off 10, 15% of our salary to gain 100% better life fulfillment, right? I think that's a great compromise. And I tell people, among the best things in life are free. Nature is free. Socializing and spend time with friends is free. Social connections are free, right? Sitting and reflecting is free. When you go to sleep and you want to prepare yourself for sleep is free. So, I'll give you a very small example, which I think all of you will chuckle. When I was in college, I got about $500, $600 in scholarship. I lived like a king. My first job, $24,000 a year, lived like a king. Then I made $100,000 a year and lived like a king. I make a lot more today, and I'm not as happy as I was when I was making 500, 24,000, and 100,000. What does it tell you? Life is not about how much money you make. Life is about just living it every day with the things that matter to you most, relationships and the environment around you.
All right, so saying that then, Leslie, what surprised you about Gen Z from this study?
I think it was that they are so anxious about getting older, and 47% of them fear aging. They have this anxiety. And again, to Sunny's point, that the Taiwanese really value financial security and independence, it's almost as if they see this as a race. Let's collect as much money as we can before we are forced to retire. Now, if we actually can say, look, we're all living longer and you'll be able to stay in the workforce for longer, therefore there is less pressure for you to amass a big pile of money, you have an opportunity to take time out for meaningful experiences, time for your family. This actually could bring more balance to their working lives. And again, by keeping these individuals in the workforce longer, there's a huge opportunity for the country to make more money, whether it's the 1.2 trillion that's based on the paper by Martin Ellison and Andrew Scott in the UK, or if it's just looking at countries that retain workers for longer, increasing their GDP by half of 1% to a full 1% per year. These are reasons to really look seriously at creating multi-stage careers where people can actually take time out, work fewer hours, not have to be so stressed and anxious about constantly working to collect more money for that financial independence they seem to value so much.
And that is the dream. Now, before we continue, let's take a look at some of the other specific findings from the survey. Now, as companies rethink how to support healthier and longer careers, workers in different markets value that trade-off in very different ways. Globally, around 42% of workers say they would trade some salary for better health or well-being benefits. But Taiwanese workers, as Leslie said, especially Gen Z, feel very differently. Only 27% of Taiwan's Gen Z say they would make that trade, while more than 56% say they would not. For comparison, globally, only 27% of Gen Z disagree. And among Taiwanese women, this is interesting, nearly half reject giving up salary for well-being benefits. That's far higher than the global average. Now, in fact, Taiwan's Gen Z rejection rate is more than double the global level and significantly higher than India, Japan, or China. Now, this is interesting, and it kind of speaks to what both of you, well, Leslie, you were talking about just before we got to this graphic. Explain to us why Taiwan Gen Z, to a certain extent, are really, really focused, it seems, while they do want that work-life balance, but also seem to be very focused on making sure that they have enough financial assistance or financial support.
I think that it's simply, perhaps it's a cultural norm or a value. People really feel that the best way to age well is to have the financial resources for end-of-life care. And this could be 24/7 care in a nursing home. Certainly with women, we know women have twice the incidence of Alzheimer's than men, but generally have fewer financial resources to afford that wraparound care at the end of life. So it may be driven by that, as well as what I said about the cultural norm, this desire to amass financial resources over, let's call it, health resources. And it is something that I think all the countries around the world have tended to do. They have valued financial resources over, say, their health or health span. And I'm always telling people they have to remember to not just invest in their pension, but they have to invest in their health daily so that they have the physical independence to take care of themselves at the end of life. You'll actually save more money by investing in your health and in your well-being. Some of the things Sunny was saying, if you do that now, it is actually worth more than the financial dollar value of putting aside money in your pension. So I must say that personally, I find it unfortunately a bit short-sighted. And I hope that Taiwan will begin to value the things that Sunny was talking about, which we do know from studies contribute to greater life satisfaction as we get older.
Indeed, and there are a lot of other factors here in Taiwan facing the young. Especially when you look at average salaries, rising cost of living, always a problem. So many other things, but it seems, Sunny, Gen Z, the Gen Z surveyed seemed to feel that poor mental health and limited access to green space was also a huge obstacle to their well-being. Now, what do these factors reveal to you about the environment that Gen Z are currently working and operating in, especially in Taiwan?
I feel for them. We put the entire onus and responsibility that Gen Zs have to be a certain way, react a certain way, value something more than the other. But are we living the pressures that they're living in? Because I lived under a very different scenario than they are living, right? And so first we have to understand the psyche of the Gen Z. Why are they feeling what they're feeling? Because the world has a lot of opportunities. So much disruptions are happening in the world that is I would love to be 20, 30, 40 years younger today because it's going to be a fantastic time to live, right? And so I think it's society in general and governments in particular have to take the responsibility for creating an environment, whether through regulation, whether through common sense, whether through collaboration or partnerships, to create an environment that doesn't make the citizens and the population feel they are under undue stress, right? We can't leave everything to the government. We can't leave everything to the workplaces. We can't leave everything to the individuals or to the Gen Zs. This has to be a true collaboration, perhaps for the first time in history, where a country, the population, workplaces, and the youngsters coming up like the Gen Zs are working in tandem together for a more beautiful life, for a more harmonious life. So that's number one. So as again, Gen Zs are concerned, I think it's a lack of education that also has made them think a certain way. And I'll add to that another thing. We think India, with a population of 1.4 billion people, is a very pressure cook environment. There's a lot of competition. But I would like to say also that Taiwan, as a smaller country, is also a highly competitive environment because everything is so visible. You can't hide in numbers. And so you become more visible no matter what you do or don't do, how you feel, you don't feel. A lot of people notice. Like if you live in a neighborhood, in a suburb, people notice you a lot more than when you're living in a city. So both a very small country or very big country have pressures that are very similar, except in a smaller country, or like a smaller company, everybody knows everybody, so to speak, right? So suddenly you're saying, I've been washed, you know? So I would suggest that it should truly be a partnership across all, and that starts with leadership in the government, leadership in workplaces, and leadership in general society, where people take responsibility that this is not my problem, this is our problem. This is not my concern, this is a shared concern. That mindset has to change. And I seriously implore that education institutions from schools to colleges should look at infusing well-being into their curriculum. It will make our kids future-proof. And no matter what disruptions come, whether it's AI, whether it's mental fatigue, it's it's longevity, and how do I do financial planning for my longevity? I don't know, I'm going to live 100, maybe 120. All of that becomes future-proof because you're starting a long-term view to everything, not a short-term transactional view to every issue. And there's a day and night difference in looking at things that way.
Right. So let's take a look at some of the other findings of the study. The Global Longevity Study asked Taiwanese, Gen Z, and Millennials, what factors have prevented you from leading a healthier, happier life in the past year? And it seems that many of the concerns that we've spoken about were shared by both generations. For Gen Z, the top obstacles are financial constraints at 59%, followed by poor mental health and work commitments. They also pointed to limited access to green spaces and family commitments. For Millennials, financial pressures were also the biggest barrier at 57%, followed by work commitments and mental health concerns. Nearly 24% said inadequate workplace support held them back, and almost as many cited family responsibilities. Wow, that is a lot to take on, in addition to trying to grow a career, a family, and all the other things that these two generations face. So Leslie, so if you take the long view into a world where 100 lives will now start becoming normal, what does a truly longevity workplace or longevity-ready workplace look like, especially given that you do have a personal interest in Taiwan, for Taiwan, and what should the considerations be when we're trying to accommodate the next generations that are coming into the workplace?
Well, I do think it goes back to the multi-stage career and the fact that we are moving from a system where we front-ended education heavily and then we stayed in a particular industry for the entirety of our careers, and then we retired. Now, with a multi-stage career, we have to also adapt to multiple industry changes, different demands, and the need for reskilling and upskilling. At the same time, companies that want to retain workers need to allow people to have time out. You saw that nearly a quarter of respondents said that family commitments were preventing them from actually taking care of themselves. Well, if those individuals were able to take some time out, maybe working 4 days a week instead of 5, they would be able to make those commitments as well as take care of their health. I think that governments also need to think about the fact that we're living longer, but we also have a chronological age and a biological age. And again, going back to the idea, if we can slow the pace at which we're aging, we can, as populations, avoid the diseases of aging for longer. And that is a savings to societies. It is a savings to the individual who doesn't have to face getting a life-threatening illness early in life. And I'm a case in point. Even though I am 60 years old and was told 21 years ago that I would die within 5 years, my biological age now is 21, and I began a new company 5 years ago. So I am a case in point that you can actually start over again later in life and make contributions both to society, but also to business. And it is never too late to retrain. I think this is also why leading institutions such as Harvard, Stanford, and now even Oxford have these programs where individuals go back to university later in life after they have finished one career, they come back to study for another. I think we will see much more of that.
Wow, that is impressive, Leslie. And Sunny, you know, with many companies in Taiwan, and I would even say government institutions, are very reluctant to move towards that kind of flexibility you were talking about, or putting the people first, basically ethos. What do you have to say to them, especially in Taiwan, about productivity when you take into account a person's well-being or an employee's well-being?
I'll make 2 points here. First, Leslie very well articulated the question that you had, the response to it. One is that I think the biggest problem we are facing today is people are living fast. I think people should just slow down, breathe a little, live in the now. And because it's, all these percentages we discussed, which are alarming, they are symptoms to they're the headaches. They are the symptoms to the root cause of the problem. And the root cause of the problem is the modern lifestyle, which is fast, which is furious, which is, keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak. If you slow down, breathe a little, live in the now, you will see that a lot of these problems will disappear, because a lot of the inconsequential stuff we do during the day, during the week, in our lifetime, we won't be doing it because we won't see any meaning in it. We'll say, because if you're rushing all the time, you have no time to reflect and think and strategize and saying, hey, hold on, is this something I really have to do? Now let's put that in the context of a workplace. I would say the leaders of every company should slow down, should breathe a little more, should live in the now. They'll make better decisions. They'll be able to reflect better on past behaviors and consequences of decisions made. By slowing down, you are more deliberate, you're more thoughtful, you go deeper. And what do we cherish more in our employees and leadership? Be able to be good thinkers. The biggest issue in the world today, in the corporate workplace, is, can we find good enough thinkers who can think through? If you're fast and furious, you're driving a race car, you ain't thinking, you're reacting, you are instinctive, you are not intuitive. So if you just do those things, and this doesn't cost us anything, and we don't have to read a book about it. Simple thing, if they just start with that, that's a good start of a well-being plan. And from there you realize, oh my God, if this could do this, what if I did more and more and more? And suddenly you have a culture of well-being in the corporate workplace, which rewards and recognizes and acknowledges physical well-being or emotional well-being, or for that matter, planetary well-being, giving back, a sense of service, empathy, compassion. Now suddenly you weave those ingredients in the corporate workplace to create a culture of well-being. What a sea change. And these things don't cost you anything. You don't have to find a yoga instructor for that. You don't have to find a meditation instructor for that. You don't have to find any of those people. It is very cheap to do. And that's a good starting point as far as I'm concerned.
All right, I see you get the thumbs up there. Thank you both so much. Thank you, Gurpreet Sunny Singh in Doha and Leslie Kenny in Oxford in the UK.